order. And I'll turn it right over to Andrew to go over our hybrid meeting.
Thank you. So I'm Andrew McNichol, the Community Development Director. Joined by me tonight from staff is Senior Planner Olivia Knightley. This is a Cpdc meeting scheduled for Monday, August 12th. From the board, Cpdc Planning Board tonight, everybody is in person. We have members John Arena, Tom Armstrong, Guy Manganiello, Hillary Mateve, Heather Klisch, and Chair John Weston. This is a hybrid meeting, however, so we do have some participants on the Zoom. We are going to look to stick to our standard format to the best case possible, in that the applicant will present their application to the board. The board will provide comment and question amongst themselves, then open to public comment, and then decide action from there. If you are in person here tonight, there's a sign-in sheet in the corner. If you haven't signed in, please do. Those on Zoom will capture you. If you have public comment, please raise your hand during the public comment period and the chair will look to acknowledge you. If you're on Zoom, you can use the raise hand feature found under reactions, or if your camera is on, simply wave your hand around, we'll capture you there for them as well. Please introduce your name and address for the record during your public comment, so we can capture that. And other than that, lastly to add is that this meeting is being recorded and broadcasted on the local channels by RCTV. I think that's it.
Sounds good to me. So before we get on to our next agenda, I do want to welcome Guy. I know there's a little bit of mix-up for the last meeting, but welcome. You know, and I had extended this to our other new member, John, that, you know, some of this stuff, right? Zoning is a world of its own. If you have questions about what we can do, what we should do, what we shouldn't do, feel free to ask me or anyone else that's been on board for a while. So, yeah. And with that, first item on the agenda is continued public hearing for a major modification of definitive subdivision of Grandview Road extension.
I believe the engineer is online. Gio, let me unmute there. I have the plans that I can share on screen. I do believe this was last discussed in June. Gio, I don't think there have been any plan modifications, but it probably helps because we have new members if you really just want to go through the modification and application as a whole.
Absolutely. Good afternoon. My name is Giovanni Federa, the owner of Federa Engineering out of Danvers, Mass. We had this subdivision. It was originally proposed in 2021 as a 4-lot subdivision. 4 Cold Spring Road. It was being subdivided as
Gio, give me 1 second. Don't mean to cut you off.
Sure thing.
I'm sorry, I saw a hand raised.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
Tony DeRezzo, 130 John Street. I believe Mr. Mangiello and Mr. Federa have business relations, and therefore Mr. Mangiello should be recusing himself from this hearing.
So yeah, I guess that's one thing, right? If I think you, right, all the new members should have received, right, we all get conflict of interest training, right? So, right, that's a self-disclosure, right? If you have.
Yeah, I was raising my hand for that, but not because of business relations. It's my cousin.
Oh, okay. All right. So I think, right, I think the rule is, I don't know what the rule is, honestly.
I think this
with regard to that.
precedes my appointment to the board and is in motion as it stands. So I think so many meetings have passed. I don't even think I can weigh in on this regardless, correct?
Yeah, so there is the aspect that
Yeah.
I don't believe we received bulletin rules from Mr. Reno, Mr. Manganiello, so they're not voting members if a vote comes at whatever period of time.
So I wasn't really concerned with that.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, right, there is a nuance there between things that you can vote on and things that you can partake in deliberation
Right.
on, and that's the line where I don't know.
Yeah, generally, if there's a recuse, we would recommend recusing from the whole discussion.
Yeah.
But in the case if there's not financial interest in the application, it doesn't cross that line. And so that's really the.
Okay, so that's the financial interest is.
Or
is-
personal direct family connections with cousins.
All right.
I mean, he's the engineer, not the owner of the development.
There is a portion in the conflict of interest law related to, I don't know if it's just planning boards or all public employees, that you also have to avoid the appearance of the conflict of interest. And all that requires, I believe, is a written and then
Yeah.
recommended verbal disclosure, so that there's a record of what the relationship is, and when you write the written disclosure, I've done this before, you're also kind of promising to approach it without bias.
Which I think is what.
And that's for family members or friends or business relationships beyond your immediate family.
Exactly.
I reviewed the Mullen Rule material from Olivia. I didn't immediately see how it applies to this discussion here. The documents I got appear to be more responding to an absence from a regularly scheduled meeting. I saw nothing else.
Right, so we're sort of mixing two different discussions, right? One issue is a Mullen Rule, where if you were not at
So that's
one meeting or two meetings.
That's unrelated to
Right.
this topic.
Yeah, so that applies to both of you because this happened before you were on the board. The other topic that sort of got mushed in there together was conflict of interest or appearance of conflict of interest.
There's no limitation on anyone otherwise qualified to vote tonight by virtue of the Mullen, true? For the Mullen, I don't see any restrictions in here on voting. Did I misunderstand what was said earlier?
Sorry, so you can't vote on an application if you haven't filled and posted the Mullen Rule, and acknowledge that you watched the recording of that hearing in June.
I see, it's becoming up to speed with history. Okay,
Exactly.
thank you, now I understand.
And each member, you're allowed one on any given hearing, so if there is no vote tonight, you can still go back and watch that and fill it.
We assume there's no prohibition on asking questions.
No.
It's a meeting kind of pointless otherwise.
And this, just for reference, is a motion that requires 3 quorum. It's not a supermajority, so 3 voting bodies are needed for any given motion in relation to this application.
Say that again?
3 voting members.
So it's not a quorum of this is a body of 5 or 7?
Five.
Okay, 3 is
5
5,
with
thank you.
one alternate or associate.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Heather is correct in that a disclosure needs to be made, but that disclosure needs to be written and submitted to the appointing authority before the meeting begins.
It's true.
Correct.
So
So, right, I think in this particular case, right, before you are able to do that, because you have, right, is to recuse yourself from not only voting, but from discussion on this, and then,
I intend on doing so.
okay.
Do I need to say it again? I think I said it, but should I repeat it? Yeah, so I'm recusing myself from discussion.
Yeah,
Discussion,
deliberation.
yeah.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, recusal usually means that they leave the meeting entirely,
This portion.
or this portion of it, correct?
I'm
I think we've done it in the past where it would just be required.
Yeah.
The zoning board, they would leave the building.
Okay.
I've seen it done both.
I've seen it done
Yes.
both as well.
Town member, right? A citizen of the town
Yeah.
of Easley.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm fine with that. especially since the applicant's on remote. All right. We can move forward. Oh, is he unmuted? Yeah.
All right, there we go. All right, just to so starting over, I'm Giovanni Federa. All right, so this project was originally proposed in 2021 as a 4-lot subdivision for Cold Spring Road. The existing house that's there right now will remain, and the original proposal was to build 3 new houses in the rear and extend Grandview Road as about a 250-foot roadway. Over time, the project changed, and the original proposal had a subsurface infiltration system, and that was located between lots 2 and 3. Between the original proposal and 2023, there was a modification, and that modification included having we changed that subsurface infiltration system to be an above ground pond, and that was located in the same location between lots 2 and 3. That was approved in 2023. The road was constructed and a lot of site work was completed. The pond was installed, drainage infrastructure was installed, the road was paved with boundary course, and the project came to a stop. And the owners decided that they wanted to install the subsurface infiltration system that was similar to the 2021 application. And that is the modification that we're presenting now. When we presented this project in June, we haven't had any changes since that plan that we looked at in June. So it's the same design, subsurface infiltration. It has a larger storage capacity than the pond has today. So it will be a better system. There will be a nice clear lawn in that area. So it's just a better overall design. Lots 3 and 4 will be constructed. Lot 2 will not be constructed. That's going to remain with Lot 1, the owner of 4 Cold Spring Road. So we just got comments from the engineering department in a memo form today, and there were only really 2 comments in that memo that kind of stood out, and I haven't had a chance to address them just because we got them today. The first comment was that it said, I can work this out with the engineering department, but they want us to just address stormwater concerns that they mentioned, and basically just contain all stormwater on site. I can work this out with them. I haven't had time to go back and forth with maybe a redesign or just coordinating with them. So I'm going to need some time to address these comments, and I'm just in the meantime, I'm happy to answer any questions or bring anyone up to speed. And but I don't know if you had a chance to look at the memo from the engineering department. But I'm happy to just discuss the project or answer any questions or just kind of go over the design. I believe the applicants are in attendance. If anyone wants to add to this, I'm happy to just hand it over to anyone else.
So I'll admit I'm a little lost. What's the difference, right? You were here you were with us in June, you said?
That's correct.
Yeah, what's the difference from what we're looking at now from what we saw in June?
There is no difference. We haven't made a modification at all. We haven't had any communication with the engineering department just until today.
Oh, okay.
And we got that.
Okay.
Yeah, we got that memo today.
All right.
So I haven't had a chance to address any comments.
Okay.
And so
I guess that's
the questions for the board at that time, if I remember correctly, were about the emergency overflow area and point of discharge. And there was some question on the 100-year storm calculations for the two separate catchment areas. Engineering did review the overflow discharge does meet what is our required setbacks from the property lines of 10 feet. So we did note it as an area that should the emergency overflow look to be activating and discharging further, I'm trying to think of plan, we'll call it plan north, and spill over property lines, that we would seek amendments and additions, but we can't require them at this point because they meet the expected setbacks. And the second comment was about a potential for a catch basin near the potential future driveway of lot 2, but where lot 2 is not being proposed for construction in this immediate short-term actions. It was more of a, hey, if you do this and when you come in for driveway permitting, we might look for additional drainage and capture infrastructure then. So both comments I think were addressed, but we can also discuss them and look for improvements here.
Who has responsibility for maintenance of the underground system?
That will be lot 3 and 4, which is the proposed here.
And that'll be recorded?
Yep.
And we haven't seen this yet, in terms of maintenance.
No, those are typically a condition in the original.
Yeah, that's what I changed, I think. Okay. I'll just make a statement. I think it should be clearly approved. The maintenance plan needs to clearly be approved by staff. And I may add others as well too, Conservation Commission.
Where does lot 3 and 4 responsibility end as the stormwater?
You correct me if I'm wrong, but the entire easement area is that entire infiltration system.
That's correct. From a legal standpoint, that's the easement, yes. So maintenance of that, annual maintenance, that's outlined in the operation and maintenance plan. It's detailed in that's in the stormwater report.
And is the intention that this road eventually would be provide an easement to the town so they could, once it's up to Reading standards, it would become part of our inventory?
So
the
this
intention?
road is expected to be maintained as a private road, but we seek easements for utilities underneath that private road.
So there's no intention to make it part of the Reading's inventory? Okay. There's a reference in the engineering letter regards stormwater overflows. Does the as-built plan comply with the engineering memo as we know it today? So for example, it says no stormwater overflow shall be directed towards. Does the as-built plan comply with that?
So currently there's a pond in place, and the way that it was designed was that the pond would have an overflow that would be directed to the north, and ultimately with the natural grade going towards the wetlands all the way towards the north, everything would just overflow from the ponds and just sheet flow over lands to the wetlands. And that's essentially what the existing design is right now. And we haven't created an as-built of the pond, but the roadway, as it's shown on this plan right now, that is as-built.
So what's on the screen here is actually the pond, is that correct?
That's the subsurface infiltration.
That's the subsurface. The pond is basically overlays that, is that correct?
Yes, yes.
And up is north in this view, is that correct?
North
North
is to the left, yeah.
This way.
Okay, so this is so up is westerly in this image, okay.
Mhm.
Okay, so that would seem to comply with the thou shalt not go to the east, okay. Thank you.
I actually have a follow-up question to that. That was one of my questions where I saw in the engineering memo, that if it ends up discharging to the east, that a berm or secondary containment should be constructed. Space is tight there. I'm wondering if that needs to be constructed, where would it go?
That's something that we can work out when looking at the comments from in the memo. I will have discussions with the engineering department on addressing their comments, so we'll figure that out.
We've seen similar subdivisions down at Sanborn Lane where pop-up emitter there was, it seemed overly active, and so we required them to do berms, treatments, and additional work on the drainage prior to the completion of the project.
So it gets tested before the project is actually done?
Inspections as we do. During the permitting process, there is what is through the NIPD's permit post-storm reports, so during active storm periods, typically the engineer or even staff will go out and inspect how the system is working. That way we can get real life kind of data, and realize how it's working in the field and with the grades.
So the elevation lines here show clearly that there's at least a 7-foot gradient east to west. So in order to go east, you've got to have 3 to 4 feet of water. So I think you're reasonably safe there. What's the capacity of the underground storage unit? Is that a calculation? Or is it...
There is a calculation to that. I don't have it right off the top of my head, but I can find that information out.
Is it kind of on the scale of what the pond would be? Is that the way to think of it? It's kind of an equivalent?
Well, actually, the underground system has a larger storage capacity than the pond, and that's just because we were viewing the soils differently when looking at the redesign. So the underground system has a larger storage capacity, so it's essentially bigger than the pond.
Do you run perks on the soil underneath the underground to verify what it'll take up?
We did not run perk tests because that is a Title V, design methodology, right? That's for septic systems. But we did design the stormwater system in accordance with the Massachusetts Stormwater Handbook, which involves test pits. We did have test pits completed, and that was completed with the certified soil evaluator. So the soils were determined, and we used that data in the calculations.
Okay.
I have another question, and I'm sorry I didn't think of it before, it's just a little bit of curiosity, I suppose. Lot 2 isn't going to be built out now. How does the potential future impervious area of Lot 2 factor into all the stormwater calculations? Would that change?
It will not change because there will be a self-sufficient roof drywall specifically designated for that roof. That is the majority of the added impervious area to that site. The driveway that is would be graded towards the cul-de-sac essentially. That area was taken into consideration for the stormwater system. So if you just, once it is built, adding the driveway and having that going into the catch basin, ultimately into the stormwater system, that was taken into account. The roof drywall, that will be added once the site's built.
And the catch basin would be added when that site is built also?
Well, the catch basin that's in the cul-de-sac right now.
Right.
The driveway would be graded towards the cul-de-sac and ultimately going towards the catch basin that's currently in place.
Right, the second catch basin that was recommended by the engineering department.
Yes, I know, yeah. I'll discuss that with them. There are 2 catch basins on site right now, in the cul-de-sac.
Yeah, and the rest of the criteria are acceptable to you? That the engineering
Yes.
department has set forth? Okay.
I had a question on one of the waivers. Waiver that's been requested, waiver 5, reduces the minimum width requirement from 38 feet to 25 feet. The extra 5 feet is then used for grading on, I guess, the western side. It's not shown on the screen here. Is that particularly steep turf? Is that the idea, that you've got to grade into it?
Sorry, over here.
Yeah, so each of those lines is a foot, is that the foot elevation?
That's correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you really need some room to grade. Okay, that's fine. Thank you. And the two catch basins, I see the fiducial there, at least I think I see it, kind of in the northeast. Where's the second one approximately?
We have a double here, and a double here.
Sorry, point again?
Right here and right here at the nose of the cul-de-sac.
Is there a mouse on it? I see it. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Well, that must be the monument for surveying. That's what that is. That object in the center that looks like a, I was going to say rhombus, but it's not. What is that notating?
It's
In
here
the
at
cul-de-sac.
that
What does that notation mean?
So, when the pond was constructed, there was the proposed, so the way that it was designed was that there was the catch basin right at the end of the cul-de-sac, the double catch basin that was leading to the manhole. And then it was directed to a head wall. That head wall was basically the starting point of a sediment forebay that led to the pond. That head wall was installed. The pond was installed. So as part of this new design, that head wall will be removed in place of a drainage manhole.
Okay.
That, yeah.
Okay.
Public comment on Zoom or in the room here? Sure, Tony?
Thank you,
Thank you,
Mr.
Jay.
Chairman. Tony DeRosa, 130 John Street. I would like to review waiver number 7. This is the one where the applicant will be grading onto town property. This has been approved since 2023, and I've yet to see any official documentation that the applicant actually has an easement granted by the town. Minimally, I think that should be included in the prior to issuance of occupancy for any lot. That waiver actually should be before they even begin construction, that easement be granted. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the comment. Could you?
It's my understanding that the plan requires an easement into the town where they will grade the slope on town property.
That's a temporary easement.
No, I think it's permanent. Otherwise, they would be building a retaining wall.
That's a temporary easement. That is identified on sheet C1 on the plan of land. There was a temporary 30-foot wide slope easement.
Right.
So, Mr. Chairman, does that mean the slope will be restored back to its original grading?
No, it would be as designed. Not to the original grading, but as designed. So the grading plan, which is sheet C4, that's how it would be installed.
So then
It has been installed.
So then it's not a temporary slope easement, it's just a slope easement. Right, there's nothing temporary about it. Regardless, right, you need an easement from the town, I think is the,
To do the
is
work,
the,
you
to
need
do
the
the
actual
work,
What's
yes.
the question?
Yeah,
What's the
yes.
purpose after the work's done?
So, that's under engineering's, I mean,
It is, I'm just trying to think.
It's not
through,
an
like, there's
unusual-
access for the work and to do the grading, but we're not giving them an easement to maintain that slope and grade, so I don't know that they need a full easement from the town, but regardless, I think further consideration in a condition just to do the due diligence on that, may be warranted.
And that grading already happened?
The grading did already happen.
Is that just like informal permission then?
Is with engineering and through the permitting. Or what?
So now I'm confused, what are we talking about easements for? It's not.
well, right, if an easement was never acquired, right, then the town, if they have another purpose, they can come in there and like
Regrade
configure
it
that,
again.
regrade it, right, which would, right, undermine the applicant's roadway. And the applicant would have no say in it because they didn't pay the town for the slope easement.
Okay.
So, right, either they need it for their roadway to be whole.
So if I understand you, it's common to have work like this, casual work graded, as the as-built is graded to the existing conditions. And then after the fact, the easement is allowed to document the fact.
Well, typically, I mean, I would say in what I've seen, not within Reading, but in other projects where I've worked on this, is you get an easement, you get a slope easement before any work happens. So I don't know what happened in this case, because we usually don't get into that, right? That's a relationship between the applicant and the town. But the town should have gotten an easement for that.
Yeah, normally we would have passed this off because we already approved it. And so we're only catching this because it came back to us.
Yes. Right, because if they don't have an easement, they should have built a retaining wall.
Sounds like they got permission or full permission.
Isn't the real issue, they did or they obviously didn't get the easement. If the easement fails, who's gonna suffer the most?
Right, if the
Isn't
slope
that-
fails,
If the slope
right?
fails,
If the
yeah.
slope
Right.
fails, right.
Who's gonna suffer the most? The road's gonna overflood. And there's a flooding recapture to re-examine it later on.
No, the slope's the other way, right? Slopes down, so the slope fails, the roadway gets undermined.
It's undermined, right.
You need a ton of water.
That's a steep slope back there.
And regardless, if there is a need for an easement for the maintenance or expectations of that area, then we will seek such.
Yeah, because I'm thinking about it's like, so if the slope fails, if you have a big storm, happens a lot now. Slope fails, road fails, who's ultimately then responsible for repairing the slope in order to repair the road? And without the easement that lays out those terms, that becomes potentially the town's liability that we did not get into this for.
Are any of the slopes here over one to one? What's the steepest slope you have here?
There are no slopes that are greater than 1-to-1. The slope that is in this area of the town property is 3-to-1.
About 30%.
3-to-1 is steep from the perspective of if you're walking on it, but you know, with a roadway and just the physics of soil, it's pretty sufficient for a roadway.
And where on the map is that 3/1, or 3 horizontal, 1 vertical pitch?
That's to the west of the road, so basically the bottom of this plan that's shown on screen right now.
And those grade marks approximate the original undisturbed slope?
If you look closer behind the dark lines, the gray dashed
Yep.
contours, that was the existing before construction started. Those were the existing contours.
So 110 becomes 112. It's within a foot of the
Yes.
original, although it's changed in direction. Okay. Not the same as the original.
Well, it's not really though. We have 108, but it used to be 111. Anyhow, I think it would be cleaner to have a formal easement. I mean, maybe it'll be fine, but maybe it won't be. So there should be an easement since that's what the original
Yes.
plan called for.
Right, and a 3-to-1 slope, that's probably, like you say, that's not really probably an issue unless, right, I think this is a location, right, water could come flowing down Oakland Road through the woods, right? Something crazy would happen, come through the woods and come and, start to wash that out. Is it likely to happen? No, but that's why
But there's
we
a
all
lot
have
happening.
lawyers, right?
It's not
That's why we all have lawyers to put in that sort of stuff, right? I mean,
But with an obligation to maintain.
Yes, absolutely.
you got a water tower up on top of you too, anything can happen, right? Upgrade. Seen it happen.
But all the waivers were previously granted.
Yes.
There's no modifications necessarily that we're working on tonight.
Well, we could
But we can
create
discuss
another.
them,
Yeah.
right? Checking.
And then, right, we did get some public comment
Yeah, we do have some hands raised on Zoom.
Okay.
as well. To ask Ms. Karam.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Susan Coram. I'm at 31 Ridge Road. I have a different question, but before I ask that one, I would just note that the drawing that's up on the screen now, you're discussing water coming down, well, from Oakland, yes. Because you can see the contour lines on the lower right-hand side are steeply pitched toward this site, and also contour lines that you don't see that are to the west of the cul-de-sac, which would be the bottom of this drawing, are also steeply pitched to the site. So that 108 contour line that's at the bottom of the slope from the cul-de-sac road there is also the bottom of the slope coming from Oakland. So there is quite a bit of water that collects there now when it rains. All right. So the question that I wanted to ask, and I say this without knowing a whole lot about HOAs and the town's ability to influence how HOAs are done. But I look at this and I see that lots 2, 3, and 4 are benefiting from the construction of the cul-de-sac, which then enables them to be buildable lots. And usually in an HOA, a lot of it is about shared amenities that benefit the homeowners. But in this case, we have this issue where also the HOA seems to be geared toward maintaining this drainage system and dealing with any problems that might come up, so that it's the project's responsibility and then the homeowner's responsibility to deal with that and protect the neighbors to the east, which is the top of this plan, from possible problems with the drainage. the drainage system there that's built on lots 2 and 3 is going to be the responsibility of homeowners on lots 3 and 4. And my question is wouldn't it make sense for that responsibility for the homeowners association to be composed of lots 2, 3, and 4 from the beginning? That's if the homeowners association can include lots, even if they don't have houses on them yet, then it seems like you would want lot 2 to have a say in how things are dealt with, even if there's not a house on it yet. And you would want lots 2, 3, and 4 to all be making the decision and having the responsibility to make sure that that works. Also, it seems like it might be something that should be done at the beginning before and I think this might already be the case, that before the people move into houses 3 and 4, the HOA already exists. Because I worry that there can be problems with trying to get someone to join an HOA voluntarily. If it wasn't already, if their land wasn't already included in it before they moved in. So if anyone has any clarifications about that and what the town might or might not be able to do to try to sort of have this system in place so that the neighbors to the east are protected now and into the future, I would appreciate that.
Andrew, I think you usually.
Yeah, so we did condition that if lot 2 is going to directly tie into that infiltration system, that they would be required to become a part of the HOA. Right now, they're under the condition, I believe, that they'll have to maintain their own roof system, that dry well system that Mr. Federa was talking about earlier. I mean, it's no hurt to say lot 2 shall join, in my opinion. It's just, it's gonna be under a different ownership, and if it ever gets built, but to me, any future, I have no hard qualms about requiring lot 2 to join the HOA. Sorry, go ahead.
Is there any ability to have lot 2 join the HOA just as land so that they are?
I don't believe so, because the intent is to deed that land back to someone else. So it won't be in the control of the developer when building permitting and occupancy is done. But to answer your second question, at the time that we do condition the HOA docs to be drafted, recorded, and provided to homeowners prior to occupancy permits, so that they are aware, as well as to their requirements in terms of maintenance. But in terms of including lot 2 in the present state and for building permitting of lots 3 and 4, I don't see that necessary.
Okay. Thank you for answering the question.
Okay. You said there are others.
I will just note that Miss Penny Jean did ask me to read into the record, she had some noted comments that the silt fence and erosion control seemed to have been degrading over time and was knocked over or not into the proper installment. So we've noted that and asked the applicant to look at the site, go back and take a look at everything. Ms. Jean also noted town property with standing water, most specifically in that slope area, which, as Ms. Karam noted, was an existing condition, and we are also looking to see the full drainage system implemented to understand the full scope of impact there. She had some comments on the porta potty on site to be better maintained, and that the drainage ditch has been neglected and is being overgrown and not properly maintained. But part of the element here is to remove that drainage ditch. When we had gone out, we didn't see standing water in it at the time, but post storms we'll keep eyes on it. And that she had some comments on conservation and spring land. Conservation has taken a look at this property and approved it and all of its modifications, so they're aware there's a 100-foot buffer up towards the northeast corner of the site. And Miss Jean's last comment is about access for the site, but it is a private dispute, and so as it should remain. And as of everything we've reviewed, the applicant is in control of the property and can propose the modification as presented. So if there's feeling of neglect on those sides, there's action on the private side that needs to be taken to correct such.
And then I think just I think there was another comment that centered around the existence of a spring or a well
Yes.
on the site. And I not digging deep into the plans here, but right, I assume that information has been communicated both to the engineer, conservation, and the applicant's engineer. So whatever needs to be done with that is being.
Yeah, so we haven't found any findings or new impact in relation to that. But again, with the modification open in conditions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Myself?
Yes.
Yeah.
Come on.
I just wanted to say, Michael Salamone, 45 Pickett Street, I'm the applicant. I have my lawyer on the Zoom too, so if you guys have any legal questions for him regarding the access, feel free to reach out.
All right. I think it's our preference, as Andrew said, like that's an issue. Our understanding that's an issue between two private parties.
Yeah, I just found it just in case, just if you had any
I
questions.
appreciate that. Yep. Comments or questions from the board? No.
I have one more.
And then any other public comments?
Not seeing any hands raised at the time.
All right. So I guess the way that I see this, and please chime in if you interpreted this different, right? There are a number of things, right? The applicant got the memo. Some of them just today, right? Hasn't addressed them all. Some of them are pretty minor. Some I think are significant enough that into the core of the design here that we probably want to wait to take action until we see the plans, or at least get a response from that. There's been communication and everyone between the engineer and town's engineer and their engineer that everything is working out. I guess that's how I understand the status.
Yeah, if the applicant hasn't had time yet to respond to the engineering department and it sounds like there's some things to sort out, I'm of the same mind. I'd like to have confidence that this is sorted out.
So I think that means continuing this. I mean, I think good discussion. I think we got some stuff out so that hopefully next time it'll be shorter.
If everyone agrees, then I'll move that we continue the public hearing for the major modification to the definitive subdivision plan for the Grandview Road extension until September 9th.
Anyone want a second?
I'll second it.
All right. No roll call. All those in favor?
We're all here.
Opposed? Abstaining?
I'm not allowed to vote.
All right, you're right. You're right. All right. So, good to go for next meeting.
Thank you.
Uh, uh, So that's the one item, right, that we had a time for on our agenda. I'd be happy to talk board reorganization or MBTA communities.
Okay.
Whichever first. MBTA communities and then save board for the
Yeah.
later part of it.
We
All right.
So thank you for taking the time tonight. We want to thank those who were able to attend the forum and some of the meetings last week on the evolved concepts that we had presented. There's a total of 4 of them at the last forum. So we did briefly look to summarize those for those who couldn't attend or catch up on any recordings in a quick memo, both summarizing the concepts at a high level and providing the feedback that we heard at that forum to date. So we did provide the full presentation to hopefully give that extra level of detail too if needed for the downtown or anything, but we're happy to talk about it all tonight. So I like to think that this was another successful event, that over 100 people attended, and while a bit chaotic at times, and we got good feedback on how we can improve such structure, which is very important and well received. I think it ultimately served the goal of neighbor-to-neighbor conversations and understanding the variety of views in town and needs in the specific geographies as well. As with many cases, there's never full consensus on any given concept more than another, but everyone there could see that there is support and reasoning behind a number of the concepts, and acknowledgement that none are perfect. Each is working to minimize impact, at least be as minimal in this process as possible. We are happy to discuss any evolving thoughts on the paper compliance model, which is the existing developments plan presented as a potential option. But we do believe with what we heard was that the other concepts are reasonable and somewhat practical in their allowances, with enough understanding in their geographies and compliance controls to push forward with one or the other. Ultimately, we believe from what we've heard as well that the Main Street options and or the transitional residential is the best fit at this time, as they fit into the broader picture of the town as a whole. Certainly new comments, like that is just what it is. It's just a recommendation in our division, but certainly new comments on the industrial area are welcome. We just feel that this area is a bit too unprepped, both in their allowances and in the feedback from the town as a whole to utilize in this effort. You know, we heard a lot that yes, this area would be nice to redevelop and revitalize and refresh and enhance, but I just think it needs a bit more due diligence before using for MBTA communities, because while we undergo what is, for better or worse, a master planning process for that area, I am sure that housing will come up in certain pieces of it for discussion or for allowance, but not all of it, and we just want to give it that level of due diligence that might be warranted because it's a visually and infrastructurally more significant change than some of these other areas presented. So we just want to be better, make it better aware and help control kind of the future of that area more more thoughtfully than maybe compliance can allow for in and of itself. Not that we couldn't do both. But that's the resulting in the need in the recommendation to maybe further discuss Main Street and the transitional residential tonight. But of course, all are open on the table for you guys. But our hope is that we can identify with you tonight the best path forward so that we can start writing a bylaw. Get to the public hearing dates and schedule in September, which will be fairly quick moving. But time is of the essence, and so as we hopefully narrow today to what the CPDC preferred path from what they've heard, seen, and thought about to date, we can start further engagement around a specific concept out of the public hearings, through precinct meetings, through the lunch and learns, open hours, open office hours, all these different tools that we can use from now to November on a specific concept to again build confidence in that concept. And just briefly, we did default towards the transitional residential in that it kept the need to address the shortage of specific stock in its allowances, its potential for a bit more incremental growth, its access to amenities and uses, that affordable units remain strong in broader allowances in downtown or other areas like the industrial, and that the resident benefit did remain to be a piece of it, of homeowner control versus commercial control. But we also found Main Street meeting some of what we heard in that it's less residential area for growth. It matches existing development. It's a moderate growth rate. There's a handful of parcels of size, but it might be a bit fluctuating in how many permits we get in applications at any given time. So while the scales are a bit larger, the lots, there's not an overly high number of lots in the area, if that's the way to phrase it. There's some potential for the deed restricted affordable units there as well, and it has some moderate accessibility to open space, downtown, school. It's likely a bit more vehicular in its current design for access, but it does have that potential as well. And throughout this process, we've heard the request for overlays or questions on overlays. That zoning geography would more than likely be an overlay district, just given we're not looking to utilize all of Business A. So for whatever that means, as a tool, but it would likely be an overlay district there. So that was a quick rapid fire of reasonings, but happy to just hear where you guys are at.
Yeah, so before we get into the details here, I guess I think what I'd like to lay out is like where I think we need to go tonight. So when we look at the schedule to get to town meeting and we start to back up, it really feels like we as a board here need to make a decision on which of these options to start to move forward and dig into, because there's still a lot of work that needs to happen on the technical level to develop actually zoning language associated with whatever area that we identify. That being said, right, like there was right, because if we wait, like there's not going to be enough time to get everything done. So we really need to at least get Andrew and Olivia moving off in a direction.
Be specific
one of
with
these.
regard to dates. Where are the milestones and dates in the calendar?
So the warrant closes on September 24th, so we have to have the public hearing before then, likely 2 or 3 public hearings. While the full warrant report isn't due till October, I don't know the exact date off the top of my head, but the full warrant report is due a few weeks before town meeting. Our intent would be to look to try to have as most comprehensive of the bylaw and public hearing done before the warrant closing, so that all are aware and up to date.
In September, sorry, John, in September, you'd like to have that done, 24th.
Those two, yep.
Okay.
That answer assumes that town meeting will be the only vehicle that, fall town meeting will be the only vehicle to address this, true?
True.
What is the state mandate, what is the state dates when a submission is required?
We have to have a compliant bylaw into them for review by end of calendar year, before end of calendar.
So if hypothetically, in its infinite wisdom, the board wanted to call a special town meeting purely to talk about this, that could happen sometime after fall town meeting.
We could plot for an early to mid-December.
I think it's really helpful to have a calendar, just so.
Yeah, but right, like, that, if we call it special town meeting, right, that backs, I mean, we don't gain that much
I'm not
time.
advocating, I'm just.
No, I
we don't have a
know,
calendar.
because I've thought this through too,
Yeah.
right? People have advocated, well, if it doesn't pass this town meeting, then we still have, a month and a half or 2 months. You can't do anything. You don't, from a notice standpoint.
You don't really,
you
you have
don't-
like 2 weeks.
Yeah, you probably would have had to have started before that town meeting, getting everything going, right? That's just the way those calendars go. So,
If I think back to the earlier town meeting, one of the predominant pieces of feedback from the floor was a minimally compliant plan, and the proposals here go a little.
before you go, I want to finish where I want to
Oh,
go.
please, ahead, I'm sorry.
So, right, if we, right, to work the calendar, right, optimally, we make a decision on what direction to spend some time in focusing on zoning. That being said, right, like, I think where you're going, or what you're probably thinking through, is like, there's still, right, we need still more input. What I'd like to do is provide Andrew and Olivia with a vote from this board tonight on where we, what this board sees as the most promising approach to go. But I'm going to say leave it open, leave that vote with a feedback loop from the board of the select board. And so basically putting them on notice that what this board wants to do is option B, right? And so that can get them thinking and providing some feedback. If they come back and say, they vote and say, no, we want to do something different, then, then we can then, right, have that discussion at our next meeting and sort of work that out. If we don't start making some decisions, we'll never even get to December 31st, right? Someone needs to go first, and put right, we've got a lot of options, a lot of work here. I don't want to vote, meaning close the door, but I think we need to vote or to identify the feeling of this board, so that we can start to move some of the technical side forward.
So John, in that spirit, should we go through the details of each one and what they cost, the benefits are,
I think so.
and then
I think
everybody
so.
kind of weigh in on their
Yeah.
opinions?
Yeah. But I cut off John earlier.
Yeah,
so-
where I was going, if I think back to the prior town meeting, and mind you, a lot of work's happened since then, people changed their minds, and this work is clearly a different place today than it was at the start. The judgment made at town meeting is largely political. It's got a healthy dose of zoning, but it's in the domain of voting. It's not people around the table and guessing what's best. It's actually, what do I think? Am I for or against? One of the questions I asked in the last meeting, and I asked for somebody to go back to town council, was, is our submittal in Q4, by the end of the year, the calendar year, is it subject to being reviewed if our opinions change? And the feedback I got, I think, was zoning is always subject to change, it's never done. And I don't know, we'd have to talk to the state. The reason I say that is, if you think about this as the first step of several, potentially, or 2 or 3, versus it's one and you gotta get it right. I think there's a ton of fear out there about where do I live and where does this plan sit and how does it affect me? In other words, is this whole question, is it concentrated in downtown? There's the overlay concept, which goes a long way to try to alleviate the pressures. But the clear guidance from town meeting, and again, subject to change, I don't get them together again, then we have a different answer, was a minimally compliant plan. In fact, I think there's over 100 letters to the editor to that effect, and I'm unaware of any other similar majority opinion. Now, truth be told, they haven't seen this, their opinions may change. But if I think about town meeting and the presentation, if we present one topic to town meeting, it's going to be hard for folks to participate in that meeting. It's either you like it or you don't. As I thought about it, it might be something that you build up from a base. You start, here's an assumption you started with, and we start building in some of these other elements and then get votes on the floor in favor or against. I'm not suggesting you open it up for a complete what up, but it's unlikely since you've got so many different takes and people live in various regions. I can't see there a majority coming out of that. I'm happy to be proven wrong. One of the things you might do is think about a minimalist plan that gets you a majority view with the eye to, we can do it again and revise it later if we have to or want to, or see that our original approach was flawed and we must do it. Those are all, doing something again is not necessarily a failure.
Can I add to this?
Sure, go ahead.
I see actually, if I've got my numbers right, each of these plans is pretty much a minimally compliant plan. The numbers that we have to get of units are like 1493 or something like that. Some numbers stick, some don't. And a big difference from town meeting, I was there also, is that had way more units than what was the minimally compliant. So each of these is a minimally compliant plan, and that's what we're presenting and choosing among, I think.
The numbers are less. The question is, where are they?
Right,
Right,
and I guess,
right.
then there's the concept of minimally compliant, like paper compliant. And I would not go so far as to say that there was an overwhelming majority at town meeting that wanted to really push the bounds on that. There are certainly very vocal people who wanted to push the bounds on that. And if we go back to the meeting last Wednesday and even some of these comments, I don't see that there's a clear majority. There is a political element there, a clear majority saying, only count the things that we have now. I actually heard some real distaste for that among some people.
I'm actually of the opinion, the alternative that appears to be just a paper compliant option actually will result in more housing, in more development than the other ones on the table. Because, well, we can go into the details. I mean, right? Like I don't want to jump in myself, but right. I don't think that there's clearly what you are getting at, one that's more minimally compliant than others. I guess I've always toyed with the idea of like, do we put two on the table, right? Do you put two different warrant articles, right? And when I was thinking about there, one that would have been a max and a min, right? So, right, you vote on the one that's more inclusive. If that doesn't get voted, approve. If that does get approved, then you table the other one and now with all of them sort of being sort of the way they are, I don't know, that same approach I'm not sure works.
Well, I think it does, John. I think you're onto something. I think if there's sentiment that there is a large contingency of people that think paper compliance is the way to go, maybe that's your min, right? And then I think we find the one that we all think may be the best starting point for the town, that I would say, in my opinion, is more in the spirit of law.
Yeah.
And we present that as the max, right? I think that may kind of give everyone something to chew on. And
if we don't frame it so that there's a discussion at town meeting, we're likely to end up with neither, is the problem. So I'm really thinking about how do you positioned for success. And a menu-based approach where you start with a base and build up to it with, you know, take one from Column Beach.
Yeah, the
It's
problem,
not crazy if you limit it to some
the
number.
problem here is it isn't a menu-based approach, right? We can't, I don't think we can, we have a core, right?
They're mutually exclusive. Let's say the
Yeah.
menu items, it's one plus, you know, A, B, C, or D, pick one. You can
Yes.
pick two.
Yeah.
That's sort of,
We could go for kind of the preferred alternative. I guess I'm thinking about it rather than min and max,
Yeah.
right? None of these
Yeah.
are max,
No.
they're not
No,
max.
they're not that.
But there's the alternative that, CPDC might put forward based on community input and after our hearings and everything, saying this is really the preferred alternative that gets us most. I could potentially see having kind of like the plan B. It's like, all right, the backup is if town meeting doesn't go for actually one is, I'm just gonna put another, alternative 2, 3, or 4, maybe our backup is the paper compliant one, which may be rejected by the state, and then town meeting can, have, it would be there in the warrant report, and we can go into the discussion discussing what we might want to do, and if there can't be a majority vote on that, we've got plan B.
John, I'd love, just for my own edification, I'd love to understand your thoughts on the paper compliance and how, because I also thought about this to some degree. I just see it as being, and if we're on the same track, I think there is potential for additional greater development. It would require an absorbent amount of sunken costs than anybody to walk into that, because it's
Yeah.
pretty uneconomical.
Yeah.
But I do see how, is that where you would go with that?
Well, two things. One is, right, we're talking about two different areas here, right? Just so that, right, we're talking about the gazebo circle area and the Reading Woods area. So a couple of things that I'm taking as given, especially when I look at Reading Woods, right? And it is that I think the tenor of this, right, let's start off. The state controls zoning, right? We don't control zoning, the state controls zoning, right? Right, state land court and, all of those sorts of things that happen. In the approval of, I'm going back to the approval of Lexington's zoning, they essentially said, anything that you do that will not allow that property to achieve the density that you said it will achieve, you're gonna get kicked right out, right? So they're gonna do everything in their power, the state, right, to say, if you're saying that this can get, what's the number?
Nearly doubling each.
Yeah, then guess what? Right, like existing site plans and PUD, approvals, that's all on the table. This is all by right. There's a couple of spots in there where in Reading Woods, like I could fit a building.
Yeah.
I could fit a site back in the corner. I see two locations where you take out the surface parking, you put that underground.
Podium or.
Yeah. The other property, Gazebo Circle, right, there's land, there's undeveloped land there, but it's all, there's actually quite a bit of undeveloped land on those parcels. But because it's also a condo association, right? I think all three of those, that becomes a little bit more problematic and harder to see that happen, right?
you mean
But-
Reading Commons, right?
Reading Commons,
Is
yes, not Reading.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Reading, yeah.
Be in the town forest.
Yeah, but, right, I've been in this business long enough to know that if you create zoning on something, you should never think it's not gonna happen, right? Because that's your blueprint, that's what you've said, go for it, right? Something happens, right? A fire, a storm,
Sure, you have to be ready for
something,
the
right?
possibility.
Like, you know what? Then you just,
It's open season.
yeah, it's open, exactly. The thing that we do know, however, right? So there's a potential of those two properties for some development. one more than others. I mean, one much more than the other. But what we also know is that the South Main Street is developing as we speak, right? Like every day, right? There's more stuff happening there. And so whether we rezone it or not, that's developing, right? So if we go and kid ourselves, and my feeling is if we go and kid ourselves that we think that the minimal, the paper compliance one means that, nothing will really change. I think a couple of things will change there, but you know what? South Main Street's still gonna develop.
I don't
And so we may as well go for some control over it. There's
To
my opinion.
me, what, minimally compliant is, you know what? Let's embrace the change that is gonna happen anyways on South Main Street.
I think it was important that you explained your thoughts on it, because my head was kind of there, and I think not everyone is gonna connect those dots.
I know, yes. And I'll just round out my thought process and then you guys can go at it. So I think the transitional, is that what we're calling it? My feeling on that is that, so the state just passed an ADU law. Yeah, the state just passed an ADU law. And, and so an accessory dwelling unit will be allowed by right on every single family lot with some conditions, right? Conditions that, setbacks are met. They didn't necessarily say it, but I'm gonna guess that, your lot has to be compliant. So guess what, for Reading, no lots are compliant, right? And so we have, I think this is sort of odd, right? I think we have an opportunity if we want ADUs, and I personally think ADUs are sort of a one ADU per lot is a better way to increase housing in a way that's much more fitting with the neighborhood, then we can work with our zoning to retool it in a way so that the homeowners can build ADUs, which they would benefit because they're going to still stay in it. They build the ADU, they get the rent. It's not, developers as much, not developers.
Well, and it's not taking multiple lots and putting it together and putting a bigger building in a more residential area.
The ADUs can only be 900 square feet.
You suggesting the ADUs would align with mass MBTA communities?
No, they
This
don't,
is
but
a
they
separate
provide
thing.
housing.
This is later on. I'm just saying that there's, I think in the future, there's a different approach that is much more fitting with Reading and the existing neighborhoods to continue to support housing in Reading near the transit station that is not MBTA communities, not this big clunky thing that we're trying to jam wherever it can be. It's zoning that the state actually, again, came and said it applies across the entire state, whether you like it or not.
So if I understand it, you're postulating that ADUs may be a better way to have homeowners manage the growth in their own neighborhoods.
Yes.
As an alternative potentially to MBTA community.
It's not an alternative.
I know it's not legally an alternative.
It's an
It's an and,
Yeah,
it's an
like-
and, yes.
So for instance, can I just,
Yeah,
are
yeah,
you done?
yeah,
I don't,
yes,
okay, so
yeah.
jumping in, I just have to jump in because it's very consistent with my thought. It's no secret. I've said it in our own public meetings that, geez, maybe before the state passed the law, maybe we should allow accessory dwelling units everywhere. And because there's a reason for that, is that that takes care of that one facet of that missing middle portion. There was a woman at town meeting who got up and said, when my clients want to build in-law apartments or places for their kids, our zoning doesn't allow it. So that would allow basically a second small living space on a property without, in the transitional residential area, My biggest concern has been subjecting, say, a house that doesn't have the right because they aren't big enough to redevelop into a triplex or a sixplex or something like that. It would prevent, okay, what I'm trying to say is it allows kind of equitable development, especially if we take care of what are now non-conforming lots. My concern with the transitional area all along is if you look at the kind of the disbursement of lots that can be developed and can't be developed, is some properties would be developed with, maybe up to 6 units right next to properties that wouldn't be able to have the financial gain of selling their property, for instance, to be redeveloped. So there'd be some real impacts and some real friction. And politically, if we go to town meeting suggesting almost exactly the same thing that everybody did not like last time around, I think that would be problematic.
So we have by right in-law apartments today in Reading.
No,
No.
we don't.
No, we don't.
Now we do because the state just made it
No,
that way.
we passed this back, we had accessory dwellings.
So
We allow ADUs by right if you have no increase to gross floor area and they're attached, which is very rare to see here.
There's also a non-attached instance as well.
Yeah, there's the special
Special.
permit.
Right, finished basements,
It's not rare, right?
it's not rare,
But
yeah.
special permits are required when you add gross floor area.
But I was on the board when that passed, that was intended as predominantly keeping, elderly moms and dads next to the kids and trying to keep folks, aging in place. This, I guess, expands that to say it doesn't have to be an in-law, it could be another entity.
Yes.
But it's one parcel, so now you have 2 owners on one parcel,
No, not 2 owners.
No.
It's still one parcel.
so it would be a rental unit then, most likely.
My only, yeah, it could be, yes.
Otherwise, you have to subdivide the property and all
Yes,
that.
yes, yeah, it's under one ownership.
It's early I haven't really fully formed my thoughts on this. I just think we have a lot in front of us with MBTA communities.
Yeah.
I really think we should.
And let me say,
It's great, it's a lot, it's a fun thing to talk about, it's kind of a different thing to talk about.
The only reason I brought it up is because, right, it is something that we heard a lot about the need for something that it seems like the ADU law that we don't have a chance, it's being imposed across the state. Like that seems like it will match with a lot of the things that we heard when we were talking about the missing middle pieces. And that's really why I brought it up.
Yeah,
Is not that I want to get into the details of that, but that some of that fits those comments that we heard a lot.
Right, and it kind of makes the one where the downtown kind of expands outward, it makes it almost moot in a way, because you are granting that, the state has granted that
Yes.
without our input.
Yeah.
So my thought is like there's certain areas that fit the MBTA community's law and requirements better. And there is still this remaining issue of that missing middle that I think, we were looking at the transitional residential area for that. In my mind, more than once, I just thought to myself, privately, I'll share it now, there are so many duplexes in that area. Wouldn't it be awesome if MBTA communities didn't require a minimum of a triplex, because duplexes are fitting in that area. And so, my view is let's choose an option that takes care of MBTA communities, and then as a board, continue to look at other things that can help. We have the housing production plan, other things that can help, not for this town meeting, but other things that can help produce the housing that we want. And now with the new housing law that allows accessible dwelling units by right, I foresee that may become kind of actually an easier and more fitting thing to do with our town and some of our neighborhoods, but not at the same time as MBTA communities.
Requires, not allows.
Requires, I'm sorry, yes.
My only concern lies on the gamesmanship that can be played with that, because I'm already seeing it in other communities that we transact in. you know, you weren't allowed a garage. Now all of a sudden you have an accessory dwelling
Yeah.
unit, it becomes that garage you wanted. It's
Yes,
it's a very slippery slope.
Yes.
It's one we've been given, so we can't
Right.
we can't do anything about it, but
And that's why, and it's sort of like we will, this board will need to address, because it's not, like the state just said, you will let this happen. There's all these things that,
Oh, yeah.
you know, that there's all those gray areas that we probably, that this board will need to like, let's corral this in the right way.
it's
Can I ask you-
I divert, right, but
Whatever we submit to the state, I presume is binding when we submit it. We've agreed to it, it's voted by town meeting. It's got the will of town meeting behind it, whatever it shall be. The MBTA communities law is being challenged in a number of settings, and I don't begin to understand any of that. But in the event that some or all of it is viewed as needing to change, don't we put ourselves in the position of having agreed to a standard that has now morphed into something else? In other words, we're being asked to sign up to something that itself is in, I won't say it's in flux, but at a minimum it's being challenged, and that gives rise to the possibility that change may occur. Would we be wise to condition our submittal based on the current set of assumptions, and if those assumptions change, we reserve the right to review our submittal? So you don't sign up for something that, remember, that's binding when you submit it. We're making it conditional on a set of assumptions, i.e. the MBTA communities is imposed on us as written, not something you come up with a year later.
I'm gonna guess that they're not gonna allow a conditional approval.
What are you agreeing to then?
What?
So,
How can you possibly agree to a deal or set a term?
Well, we do that all the time. I mean, we approve something and the state changes, right? This is not all that unique, right? The state changes zoning laws all the time, right? Maybe not all the time, but they tweak them frequently.
Right, but this
And
is at a
so,
scale like nobody-
This is at a bigger scale, but it's not unusual that we submit something, right? And they say, no, this can't, or yeah, this is right. Maybe not us, we do it better than most, but, right, the towns, right, sort of like will approve, the state won't approve whatever was submitted and they have to go back.
yeah, so
I mean,
we
it's-
reserve the right to amend zoning and propose new zoning amendments. What we ultimately have to do is still comply with section 3A in some fashion. You can remove South Main Street and push it somewhere else, but ultimately you have to have some way of compliance with 3A. But you can amend from whatever even we propose in this year, that you can go back and adjust lot sizes, you can go back and adjust density, but you have to prove you still comply in some fashions, and whether that's mix and matching more, looking at existing developments more, using other areas more, whatever that looks like, you just have to find a way to
So,
comply.
Andrew, I think to John's point, John, I'm speaking for you, just correct me. I think what you're asking is tomorrow we decide that, hey, we messed up on this, we have another idea, still complies. Can we go back, resubmit to the state and change it?
Well, that's one, and then the other issue, comply to 5 pounds of change, and they come back and say, we agreed to 3, but you signed up for 5, so you're ready.
No, we
So
could,
then you can
yeah,
still
we
go
could,
down
yeah.
and up, but
Yeah, I think that's the point.
That's what Milton did,
Yeah.
right? Milton, town meeting approved the zoning and then they put it to
A ballot, I think.
a ballot and then they rescinded it.
And so for instance, say we don't end up going to a ballot or anything like that, but
We don't
correct
have
me
that
if I'm
even
wrong,
function.
this, like hypothetically, town meeting approves something that complies with the MBTA communities law
In November.
in November. In December, which I don't think the timing is gonna be
Right.
like that, in September, the state law gets struck down by the courts. We've submitted ours. We could either then,
Go to town meeting and.
we could go right back to town meeting in April and say, cancel that, revert back to our old zoning
And submit that,
and submit that.
we could just propose, yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
strike back to
yes.
whatever controls and allowances we had.
I see it more, John, as being a slippery slope too than just like this is step one of like a
Exactly,
12-step staircase.
exactly. It's death by 1,000 paper cuts.
That's more my concern. It's like I just don't think we have the room for that, but
Do you mean by more laws coming?
I think just by them increasing the parameters every so often as we continue to need or not need housing stock, right? This is not
Yep.
their vehicle to just keep pressing.
Might be, but that's completely out of our hands.
We can't, I know,
Yeah,
that's why
yeah,
I
that's
didn't,
good.
that's
That's
only,
what you're
that, we can't control
But
that,
yeah,
so.
call our legislators about
Yeah,
that.
But that's more where I see, and I think that's where a lot of people get scared, right?
Yeah.
It's,
The slippery slope, yeah.
One question for Andrew, on the July 31 session on page 8 of the presentation, you talked about existing development, you had it on the screen a minute ago. Bring that up. Maybe zoom in a bit for our folks at home.
Now,
Well, that's good. So the first, back up, please. Back up. A little bit more. There we go, stop right there. Well, the first bullet reads, does not appear to meet our needs. What percentage of our needs does it meet?
sorry, so in that essence, we were more considering of the needs we had heard from the community on affordability, commercial opportunity, growth. So in that essence, it was more of the qualitative needs, but this does meet compliance needs.
Okay. So it doesn't actually meet the matrix that represents our needs that you showed seconds ago.
Right.
Okay. And then the last bullet is this potential has the concept to be rejected. Isn't that true of any of our proposals?
Yes, but in this one, in the sense that the unit capacity was very, very close, that if we stand, they've cut 200 units out of both Lexington and Arlington's compliance unit capacity proposed, that if they did the same here, we would be non-compliant, we would be
But
under.
at the moment,
Andrew,
it's
why?
They had they claimed for historic elements, development standards and allowances and other, but it's only been 2 out of the 3 or all 3 letters, and they each have different reasonings, but they have cut unit capacity out of the proposed.
Each for a different cause.
Wasn't there also something in the original guidance that communities were not supposed to only count existing developed areas?
Yeah, so that was.
And that's what's been kind of untested from all of the communities, surrounding communities that have submitted something like this?
That gets at the single parcel language, which is why we chose these areas, because they have multiple parcels. It's hard to see, but the Reading Commons, we did include the gas station here. It's technically under the system 2 parcels. I think Gazebo Circle and Summit are separate parcels as well, versus Reading Woods, which was 1 parcel. We also, using this with downtown, get at the element of its different allowances in different places. So using downtown and multiple parcels in each of the side areas, we're hopeful that that may pass this.
but at the moment, it does meet the minimum.
Yes.
So I'm not fearful, I would not vote for this because it's too close to the edge or it doesn't meet the intent, right? Because in the sense that, you know what, right, the state rejects this, they're gonna reject Burlington's, they're gonna reject,
Exactly.
they're gonna reject it, and they're gonna give us all time.
You're in a good company.
Yeah, right, we're in good company, and they're gonna give us all time
Exactly.
to say, you know what, you tried, come back, right, you got 3 months.
Exactly.
What stinks is then we're back at it 3 months later and wasting everyone's time, right? I mean, time is money, so, to me, right, personally, it's just speaking on my own here, is the reason not to approve this isn't because it's too close to the edge. It's, I think that it doesn't meet the greater good of what we're trying to do, but it also actually will likely not, we're gonna get development elsewhere anyways, so the thing that people think this is gonna do isn't really what it's gonna do.
Could you combine elements of this with elements of South Main? Again, that's the menu-based approach. Could you do that?
I guess you could, but then we're going over the minimums again.
Well,
Yeah.
maybe not all three of these that are on the screen. Maybe one of the three plus something.
Well, we're already gonna have the
Instead of
green one.
downtown, you mean?
We have to have the downtown because it's.
So we need to use the downtown
Yeah.
in some fashion.
Yeah, because we need to be in that
The
circle.
calculations.
I also think, right, when you look at South Main Street, like, that is zoning over. I mean, it's not the same thing that people were talking about, but it is zoning over a lot of recently or, existing developments. I mean, there's a lot has happened. A lot has
274.
happened. What?
274.
Yeah.
Does that reach down to that?
I believe so.
I mean, it's not completely, which is good, because it gives a little bit of room for some actual housing development, which,
Yeah,
you know,
and it's happening.
Yeah.
And this, if I'm reading this correctly, the South Main Street option would allow us to require affordable units. It gets the town a lot of what people have said they wanted. As long as we have to do this.
I think my two biggest pillars here are, one, approaching this in the way where we're actually advocating in the true spirit of what's put in front of us, because I think that's important. The second part of it is making sure that things are going where they truly do belong. The last thing I think anybody wants to see in this town is single family, 8-unit building, single family.
Right.
Yeah.
It doesn't work like
Yeah.
that.
Or 8-unit, single family, 8-unit. Which was kind of my
No,
concern.
it could turn into that, right?
Yeah.
So you look at, okay, well, where do we have this commercial, retail, light industrial, in some cases, situation happening? And you look at, how do you minimally impact actual neighborhoods and comply with this and pass the smell test? And I think if we, at least in my mind, that's what I'm keeping at the forefront of my thought as I approach these. I have spun this like a million different ways in my own head and gone through, I'm in Map Geo probably as much as Andrew is. And I keep looking at those minimum compliant parcels, and to John's, like, Summit is older. Yes, it is condos. It will not be the first time that a large developer has not walked into a condo association and dangled an enormous carrot, and they all bite it. And then what you're gonna get there could be something that none of us have any say into. What would the density be? Andrew,
It's a 30 unit per acre level, you're talking.
I know you have those calculations, just because I think that's the important thing, is like, I think you also need to look at what is the potential worst case scenario?
Yeah.
Understanding what is the actual impact of a decision.
Yeah, I guess if we do go that direction, right, I would want to look at developing the zoning like it's actually gonna happen, right?
Yeah.
And really, I understand what it means, assuming that, right, someone's gonna come in and dangle a check and everyone's gonna bite, and because
It's not out of the realm of possibility.
Right.
Or a fire, right?
Yeah,
'Cause
yeah.
that's the one that
Yeah.
it's almost like a guarantee that's what's coming.
So under the density alone, you could get upwards about over 400 units. Again, lot coverages, buildings mathing how that all works out, but density alone upwards of 400 units where under 300 exists there today.
Under 300, so you're close to doubling the amount of development in that one area.
Both exist, all of these exist around an 18 units per acre realm, where we'd be proposing 30 units an acre. A bit large.
I guess that's page 16 for a minute. What's the same math tell you on John Street or Walker's Brook?
So this is another larger parcels. There are 8 parcels. They're very large. You're looking at on the Frayne parcel, which is the southernmost parcel, under density again alone about 300 units when you factor in the wetlands. Majority of those lots average under density 50 to 60 units allowed by right, some upwards of 90, 80 to 90.
My general sentiment with that one is we can do a better job there master planning.
Does this prevent you from master planning if it's an overlay district?
That's a good question.
I think it does. I think you can do both at the same time.
Unless somebody comes in and develops it before you've got your master plan
Well,
done.
you can master plan it, but the other zoning is gonna be there, so their incentive will always be, right, if you have a by right, if you have a by right option there and you're looking to make quick money, right, that's the direction you go. You wouldn't follow the master plan.
We might find that 20 units an acre is reasonable there, but we're already writing in 30, 35 units an acre here, so the floor just changes as soon as you use it.
In an environment where we're compelled to do this, the nice thing about this region to me is relatively less impactful to existing residences. It does favor larger properties. And it's a bad example, but you start to get the sense that the field, somewhat like the Market Street in Linfield, where you have residences in proximity to stores, close in walking distance. It's not perfect because it's not master planned that way, but we're starting with a half-built plan already, so we'll probably never get there in the town already. We don't have a golf course that somebody's gonna come up with.
Yeah.
This to me feels like it's minimally impactful. Is that Ash Street that runs down?
Yeah.
Just below?
Yeah.
I mean, that's gonna be a problem. But you got that's what, Walker's Brook Drive above it, and then on the other side is Home Depot and store over there. It's not crazy. And if you, in terms of who's really gonna be impacted by this, it's probably the least impactful to neighbors. And it's most focused on larger buildings with higher density where we can get to your numbers quicker. We're limited to what, 4 stories or 62 feet?
In this 4 stories, yeah.
Can you get to 62 feet? Is it limited to 4 and 62, or is it?
No, it's usually 4 to 45 feet.
That area is gonna get built out faster if you go that area.
That might be
Much
okay.
faster, it's gonna be money, there's gonna be money available.
That might be okay.
I guess I think of this as, right, you rezone that and, right, think of those are gonna be future residents, right? And what you don't wanna do is set up for a future Reading neighborhood, like a situation that's not good, right? So you're,
What do you mean?
what's that?
What do you mean? Give me
Oh, there's no residents there now.
There's no residents. You've got you're hemmed in there. You've got the train tracks, which is a significant safety issue. Your backyard is or your front yard is the back of the shopping
The
market basket, right? You're sort of guaranteed that it's not going to be high quality, right? Like someone's would come in there and develop something that's, I guess it's not. To me, it's not developing a thriving neighborhood that I would be psyched to have, my kids live in.
I think, in just my own opinion, I think 40B ends up becoming a better vehicle for larger lots of land than this would.
Yeah.
So I think you're always gonna get trumped by somebody tomorrow if they could, and that already exists, so I would see that going down that path much faster than, yeah, 30 units an acre is not enough when you're talking about what you move into like acquiring and actually developing something in that area, so I don't know.
I puzzled this one in my mind a lot actually and kind of preferred it at first. But what I was puzzling was like, oh, is there a way to kind of connect it to downtown, put a trail in down to the lake, and the railroad tracks keep getting in the way in my mind physically. And then as I was walking, as I was listening on the 31st and read some of the outtakes afterwards and heard from people who attended that, I heard something really compelling that the Eastern Gateway, I heard people having concerns that it would likely be developed kind of like all at once, where South Main Street would end up being a little bit more incremental and the town could maybe have some space to adjust to that. And I found that pretty compelling.
You've got what, like a dozen landowners there? Yeah, rough, under a dozen, yeah, I looked, yeah, so much easier to piece together those things, and I'm not saying everybody there's, yeah.
You do have access to Ash Street, and you might be able to gain more than one egress and ingress. I mean, it is high intensity, I agree with you, it's a 2-lane road.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was
I know
puzzling through, John.
They already have lots of gripes on that street from what I've seen when I travel down and just speeding as is. But that's a whole other conversation.
And another thing I heard, and I know, I mean, another thing I heard is some interest in kind of more intentionally redeveloping that area, you know, maybe to include some mixed use, which I believe we couldn't require there as part of the MBTA law, MBTA zoning because of its location away from our downtown center. And so I don't know, I found it pretty compelling that maybe there are other things that we could do with that property that, with that section that the town might be happier, people in town might be happier with ultimately.
The biggest problem that we heard on South Main Street from Pinevale, in my view, was the inability of pedestrians to cross the road and to use sidewalks and things like that. That was the biggest impact that we heard.
Is there a specific area that we can look at right now that they're speaking about?
And quickly, John, I'll correct myself, we're at 3 stories proposed here, which is usually about 30 to 35 feet, so in most any concept, there's 3-story allowances.
Are you limited to 3? Could you go to 4?
No, we're not limited to 3, that's just what is the minimum need to get the compliance.
You only needed 3 stories to
Minimum.
produce the amount of units.
Generally on South Main Street,
Right there.
this is a little too far down from where we proposed, but that is about the last crosswalk,
It's not,
for a good number of blocks.
and it doesn't have a blinker or anything, it's just,
28 is a state highway, so you'd need to petition the state.
Yeah, so when we had gone through the redesign there were considerations of additional crosswalks, but mid-block crosswalks were the preferred alternative on Main Street.
And this would go all the way down to Summer Ave, the intersection
Yes.
down by the Exxon, right?
Yeah.
So, but aside from the one place that we worked on, which was Pine Vale, and again, that was apartment complex. I think there's another apartment complex on the same side of the street closer to the track, at the crossing. But all the others really have been commercial. You got McDonald's, you got Chase, you got the mixed use building next door to that. They're all going in right now.
right, and across from Pinevale, like, so across the street from the strata or whatever we just
Yeah, right.
worked on.
Yeah.
There's a lot more of the
Correct.
housing,
Which
like
was,
that's new.
which was a by right,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Because there is,
So that would
Some-
be A47.
oh, yeah.
There's another lot on that street that also has that same zoning.
Yeah.
That just recently resold.
And the thing that was neat about that one that you just showed is there's a back trail to get back to Ash Street from there. So with all of these, we could look for possibilities for connections to other streets.
Just like with Main and Pineville improvement.
Yeah.
And we're in development already, cause we're started, but I think it's important that I say that I do own 459 Main Street, or a part owner of 459
Yeah.
Main Street. And so just as public knowledge.
Yeah.
We'll exclude that.
It's already in process, we've started demolition stuff, but yeah. And then I also own a home that I think would fall into one of the other plans, on Arlington Street.
Transitional.
Yeah, but I think that lot is just, for everybody's edification, I think it's like sub 5,000 square feet, I mean, nothing can really happen there, and it's a two-family as it is.
As long as you brought that up, are all of these options more than 10% of the?
Do we talk with
Do we
town
talk,
council?
do we talk about town council about if we need to recuse ourselves from this whole thing if we own property in? Because the other piece of planning board conflict of interest is that if we're zoning, what is it? If we're zoning for something that is a, it's like 10% or less of the town, then you have a potential conflict of interest if you own property in that area. Because then it's not considered general zoning.
Right, financial interest.
Yeah, so our further review of it, it's always personal, right? They can't necessarily guide us, but we've gotten some feedback on some of the specifics, but there is a 10% segment rule for residents, and what it is your general area may be less than 10%, but 10% of more of the residents there share the same type of financial interest. There's some disposition agreements on that. So if in no case do I find that any of our geographies maintain greater than 10% of Reading's population.
Population, so not by size, but by population.
Right, so there are certain towns or maybe even areas in town that you might envision a scenario where less than 10% of the area impacts more than 10% of the population, but in Reading, at least in our proposals, that's not.
So that being said, and the way that I read the conflict of interest rules is that if any of us have an ownership interest in any of these areas, right, then, right, because they're all less than 10%, so we'd be zoning our own property, rezoning our own property in which we have a financial interest, right? So, then we need to, recuse ourselves not only of the vote, but of, again, discussion.
That's the way I read it too,
That's
and
the
I
way I
can't
read
find it now.
Yeah, so I mean, we should always acknowledge these things in a public hearing. But there's different guidance to it and finer details that can play a role in it, so.
Well, let's make sure we understand from what Guy has said, hypothetically, that he would be recused if he owns any property in any area that we are considering?
That's not what I said.
No,
I
I'm
was-
just trying to
I was
I'm
bringing
just
up
trying to
public
understand
information.
this rule here
Yeah,
because,
the two properties I own,
Yeah.
each are in different plans. Neither are candidates for the plan. One is an in-progress development that is already met the letter of all.
Permitting.
Yeah, it's, and the other being a lot so small that would not benefit from it.
So we can forward you some further summaries or guidance on it in advisory, and then it is up to your personal steps if you wish to either recuse, disclose.
I think it would be helpful for us to all have the same language, and
Mhm.
if you found an advisory on it, to have that advisory.
Yeah.
I think I
Yeah,
found it
'cause
like, I think I found it
there
like
is-
in the law itself or something.
There's one here, an appointed member of a town zoning advisory committee which will review and recommend changes to the town's bylaws with regard to a commercial district, right, which is us, is a partner in a company that owns commercial property in the district. Prior to participating in any committee discussions, the member files a disclosure with the zoning board of appeals that with a board of appeals that appointed him to the position, and then the board gives him a written determination authorizing his participation despite his company's financial interest. Then there would be no violation.
Somebody's gotta make a decision. A
What-
board, we authorize.
A board, and authorize whoever
Has to make a decision.
has to make a decision of whether that's a conflict. That goes on to say, and this is in the Town of Reading's conflict of interest summary, there is an exemption for both appointed and elected officials where the employee's task is to address a matter of general policy and the employee's financial interest is shared with a substantial portion, generally 10% or more of the town's population.
Right, so that's
So,
the things.
right, like general, when you're talking about general things, any of us, right, then yeah. But when you get down to the specific, in this case, under 10% and you have a financial interest, before you prior to participating in any committee discussions, a member files a disclosure with the, in this case, the zoning board. I would assume for us, it would be the Board of Selectmen, our appointing board.
And that was in the Town of Reading.
That's in the
conflict.
Town of Reading's 2016 Conflict of Interest Summary.
And do we have the form so we can fill it and file it?
It's super easy, I've done it.
It's not uncommon in the town of Reading where matters of procedure and compliance are argued to wee hours of the morning, so it would be wise to get this right to save us all.
Exactly.
Yes. Yes.
But Andrew, you said you also had guidance from town council on this.
Not guidance, but the specific sections that may be of reference here, so.
And that one was not one of them?
It does
Well-
say, this is in the town guidance, it says there is an exemption where the employee's task, ours, is to address a matter of policy and the employee's financial interest is shared with a substantial portion, 10% or more of the town's population. Is that?
Yeah, yeah. But I think that comes directly out of the
The state
the
guidance.
state's summary of conflict.
So
Yeah, all Reading did was they took what the state produced and said, copy and paste it, and now we call it the Town of Reading.
Yes,
Right.
exactly, it's exactly the same.
So this guidance came essentially from the state for municipal employees, which we are municipal employees. Even though we don't get any
We're
money.
appointed, we're appointed, and then it gets, they were appointed, not elected, municipal employees.
Oh, right,
Right,
right.
there are differences in that
Yes.
too.
Because if we're elected, there's no one to go to ask whether it was okay, so you don't file anything.
Andrew, do we own Guy a description of how we should comply, and whether or not he should comply with the clause? And if so, when can he get that guidance?
I will look for further guidance on this, but
I would hate to have any deliberation disqualified or called into question otherwise, so let's, I also don't want, we owe him an answer.
That was, I brought it up before I even joined or showed interest in the board, specifically calling out those two things, knowing that they could be topics of discussion.
So, here's the thing. We need to move forward, but I also don't want to put us in a position, right, where we leave you out because we want your input, but B, we sort of expose this whole process to, sort of some question, which is sort of even worse than, right, it sets us back even more. I guess, but I also don't want to lose that much time. I guess I'm gonna suggest that on this particular topic, maybe we can schedule another meeting just to talk through this, and maybe it could be short.
Because it's
It won't-
talking through the choice that we're then directing.
Then we're gonna vote on to present or ask the select board to concur or do something different, or opine a different way.
So process is we choose an option, ask the select board to concur, then a bylaw is drafted, and then we have hearings.
Yeah.
It's a lot to do.
So,
To notice it a certain.
How much notice do you need? 2 weeks? For a planning board, for a CPDC meeting, or for the hearing? Could we,
For a general meeting, we can schedule.
could we map out a time frame now, without talking about specific
yeah,
choices?
Yeah.
Cause we could even have, could we have a Zoom meeting where we're just,
oh,
like, if
yeah,
you could file a disclosure, it doesn't take long, it's easy.
yeah.
Is there a link I can do it right now?
You have to like fill out, there is a fill.
Oh, that needs to get to, yeah, that,
Booked agendas and, I don't know how fast that can move on that piece.
I'm sorry, Andrew, say that one more time, I missed
That
that.
has to get filed to the appointing authority, in this case, the select board, and then you need to get on an agenda there to either discuss or receive any approvals from them. That's the time piece that they.
That's right, for this one, because it's kind of a substantial thing, it's more than, oh, my friend is there, yeah.
So we do have some time in terms of, decision-making process, because we were hopeful that we could initiate the hearing schedule, almost every Wednesday in September, which is Wednesday, September 4th beginning. So we have a week in terms of like notice allowance,
This is gonna be every Wednesday going forward, or select board?
for CPDC.
So now we are Wednesday, that's.
Yeah, well, we were proposing to add meetings, the 4th and the 11th, and potentially the 18th if necessary before the warrant. It's fast moving, and ultimately we would hope that if we were looking for another meeting to discuss this, it would be this week, because of some requirements to get the print to the paper 2 days in advance and so on for the 2-week notice, so even meeting next Monday night, we wouldn't get the print out in time.
Could we have a Zoom meeting like this Thursday evening?
Yes, but I
That
don't,
doesn't-
yeah,
Oh,
I think that continues to be the concern.
that's the problem.
Isn't the ask to inquire with town council what documentation is needed to let Guy make the proper declarations, given that he owns 2 parcels?
yeah.
And then let
It's
her
separate
produce
I
it.
think the
Neither
documentation
is
is
it both.
fairly clear, but it's the appointing authority piece that's a little unclear.
And then you're on their schedule to meet, unless they do a Zoom meeting, you could be out by
It's a
2.
form that just looks like that. It's easy.
Am I the only one that owns anything in these areas, just to be clear?
Commercial, no.
Hillary and I got out of it.
Oh, I think does it matter whether it's,
Presumably your house would also cover if you're in the area. because you could develop
Yeah,
your
it
own
would.
house.
Yeah.
Potentially benefit from.
It would,
Yeah,
but I don't live in the area.
yeah, so it's whether you own whether you're, have a financial interest in a property.
Yeah.
Whether it's residential or commercial. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, Tony Teresa, 130 John Street. Also, just a reminder, not just you have a financial interest, but your relatives, business partners, et cetera.
Immediate family and business
Immediate, yeah.
partners, yeah.
How would you know all the properties that, like, I don't know everything that people own or don't know? How would you-
Self-disclosure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Let's start calling people.
Yeah.
Let me everything.
Right, there, each one of these does have a limitation, right? I like, some have bigger swaths of who, I mean, it's usually your spouse and your immediate family, absolutely. But then they're depending on,
Parents, brothers, sisters.
yeah,
So here it
yes.
is, the conflict of interest for planning board members, a conflict of interest is if you have your own private financial interest or your immediate family has a financial interest, and that is considered your spouse, and people who are actually directly related to you. And then there's the appearance of conflict of interest, which is what we were talking about before, which also kind of just generally requires a disclosure, and they recommend a verbal disclosure just like we did before, but you're not held to the same
Yeah.
strict standards for whether you may or may not actually participate in the deliberation.
I think we need to be squeaky clean on this.
I do too.
I don't wanna be in town meeting and have somebody stand up and say, you missed a period or
Yeah.
you missed a material part of this. And it's real, and it was innocent, but it was real,
Yes,
and then we're opposed.
I would agree.
So,
So
I really feel like I'm doing my taxes.
I think that, I'm gonna work with Andrew and Olivia to figure out some schedules, right, so that we're, so that Andrew doesn't pull his hair out right here in front of us.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And, no, it's,
I mean, we,
yeah,
the,
yeah,
you know, the conflict is what.
and so, but I'm gonna say, expect to, I would like to see if we can do a Zoom call. And so expect, some communication about setting up another previously unscheduled meeting.
Would that be a working meeting, or would it be an open meeting requiring notice to the town?
I think we need an open meeting requiring notice because we want to vote make a motion and vote to recommend something to the select board. So we have to notice anytime we meet, three of us anyway, so 3 or more, so. So we'll figure out that
When's
that
the next-
schedule. I think for your part, right, like there's the form, and just get that into the select board, and Andrew, maybe you can sort of grease the skids a little bit.
Yeah.
Of who specifically he should send that to, and
Yeah. Yeah.
give him a heads up of why that's
And
coming.
a reference, I do believe that select board meeting is a week from tomorrow, so the 20th, so
Submit it tonight.
get it by tomorrow, and if we can squeeze it on an agenda, then on the agenda, if you're willing to allow that, then
I would like really push, like say this, that we have to do this or we're not gonna comply with the MBTA and communities law, that's how tight we
Yeah.
are, or our guy will be able to participate.
Yeah. All right, so we're not gonna discuss that anymore. Unless you have logistics. What's that?
Justin, with their hand and discuss it, but
I can just
Listen.
not further comment for
Yeah. We'll take the comment,
Yeah.
but we're not gonna respond. Yeah, we're not gonna deliberate.
Marianne?
Hi, I was not gonna comment on, your property owning thing. I've been listening to your whole conversation, even though I wasn't, on the Zoom the whole time. I guess I had just some comments on the July 31st meeting, because I was there, and some of everyone's remarks on the deliberation. One comment I had, I guess for Andrew, just when he was mentioning feedback from the community. Did anyone in the community mention your changes to the downtown linchpin zone? Because those to me seemed more substantial. They weren't present in your the existing, the paper compliance model. And because those would revert back the changes that town meeting made to parking, and also, there'd be density and setback changes, and I don't know if those would also add to a lengthy town meeting discussion. I'm just wondering if that even came up in any comments, or whether people even picked up on that.
We did not get a lot of feedback on the downtown controls. There were some notes that, we would certainly wish to look at setbacks further, which most certainly is on the table, some of the finer controls, for any of the options.
Yeah, and just two other small, quick points. John Arena had pointed out, I think he was talking about a couple of your bullet points regarding the existing developments, and whether the state would reject something and how something was close to the limit. And when I was looking back at your totals, actually the existing developments provides greater capacity than Eastern Gateway, but you didn't put the disclaimer on the Eastern Gateway in your presentation. So I don't know if that kind of thing, skews the audience to thinking, oh, well, we better not look at existing developments because it might get rejected because it's so close. That one, when I'm looking, I said existing developments was providing 1530 capacity, and
Yep,
Eastern Gateway
you're
was
right.
1501. Do I have that correct?
Yeah, that was another note on that one, that we were only 8 above the unit capacity. I don't think we had discussed it tonight, but it was very close to the minimal unit capacity, and similar concerns if we lost unit capacity, we would fall under compliance.
I mean, it sounds like in your discussion tonight, first I was hearing, okay, maybe you were gonna go with the transitional residential or South Main, and then when you started talking about the accessory dwelling discussion, and I particularly like when I heard what Heather Klisch was saying and what other members were saying about how accessory dwelling is kind of hitting the missing middle, it sounded like maybe transitional residential is mooted by the accessory dwelling law that the state has passed, and maybe South Main is where you're going with maybe paper compliance as a backup. But those were just the kind of the points I wanted to raise. And I guess just the last point, I appreciate Mr. Weston's comments about, well, let's think of the worst case. Someone could come into Summit Towers and buy all 300 units and redevelop something, or there could be acts of God and the whole thing, something could go on fire. But it does kind of feel like a stretch that Reading Commons or Gazebo Circle, it would be extreme circumstances. But I'm not in the real estate development industry, and maybe these things are more common than I think. And I just want to thank all of you because it was a really good discussion. I was listening to it while walking and not seeing it, but I was familiar with it, and I'm glad. I think more meetings are needed. And thank you for giving me the time to give a comment at a late hour. I know you guys have been working hard. That's all.
Thank you, and we aren't going to respond just because we don't necessarily want to deliberate right now, but we wanted to take your comment and hear what you have to
Thank
say.
you. Thank you, no, I'm following,
All right,
I have a process question. The hearings will be on Wednesdays? Is
Those are
that,
just the tentative dates we were looking at.
are we wed to Wednesdays? Huh.
I'd love any day other than Wednesday, in fact.
I would too.
It's my late night in the office.
I have a thing that I could do on Wednesday nights.
Cross those right off the list.
I mean, unless that's the only day for other people.
Yeah, no, I'm trying to figure out, like, at least the intent if we can have enough language and preparedness that the warrant article motion in and of itself is ready by the 24th, and there's potential that we might be able to extend the hearings into
Beyond that,
October for the warrant report, so.
I don't know if I can talk anymore.
all right. Any other logistics stuff on that?
No,
You-
but on the select board update, because we had discussed that and thought that that would be a good idea, they are holding September 10th. Be able to get.
Okay, okay. Shall we move on to the industrial district redevelopment planning?
Yeah, so this is broader. The master planning effort is starting to kick off at the end of the month. We'll have a working group. For those unfamiliar, I should step back. We've received a grant award. Partner and awarded the contract to what is Form in Place, a consultant team who partners with Cpdc on the engineering side and JM Goldson on the engagement side for a broad range of partners to help engage on the long-term, short, medium, and long-term vision of the industrial district. Really, the Eastern Gateway and the Market Basket Plaza, anything north of Walker's Brook is not necessarily included, the Staples Plaza, that area, but south of Walker's Brook, the Market Basket and General Way, the Longhorns and the Bertucci's Plaza down there, even over towards the RMLD campus and those developments, that we want to complete the vision of what that whole area looks like and how it connects to Walker's Brook and the downtown, to leverage what would hopefully be next steps of policy or other tools that the town can use for the development that they wish to see there, whether that's housing, mixed use, both, or manufacturing and jobs. That's kind of the effort of one, to figure out what do we wish to see there from a broad perspective, and then two, engage around that. So we have a small municipal working team set to help steer the ship, but what we'd also like to do is formulate a steering committee for this one, because it's such a larger practice and redevelopment effort to vision this area. So we are partnering with RMLD in a portion of this because they are a substantial player in that area. So ideally that steering committee, and we're fleshing out kind of their actual action items and what is their purpose as the steering committee, but ideally that would have a member of Cpdc sitting on it to help guide both the recommendations and priorities, but also the approach to the broader public when we do surveys, workshops, events, things of the nature to help guide the public to towards answers and solutions. So that was really the ask tonight. If anybody had interest of volunteering for that effort, we are preliminary considering that that steering committee would look to try to meet during daytime working hours. If we can help it for either monthly or bi-monthly as necessary, once a month potentially. So just wanted to throw that out there. We're meeting with the consultant team in 2 weeks to officially kind of kick off and starting to put more thoughts to it, but as those things start to come more into form, if anybody has the time and would like to consider volunteering,
Do you have a general day, Andrew, in mind?
we do not. I guess we would poll the broader committee.
Question, just so we can be very clear on the area, so I don't have. Can you show me specifically?
Yep, give me 1 second here, pull it up. we're talking this chunk of like southwest of Walker's Brook Drive, so this entire,
So all the commercial area,
right,
not,
On both sides of the railroad tracks?
yes.
it doesn't, you said it does not extend across the street, so East Lakeview has nothing to do with this.
No.
In that case, yeah, I mean, in the event that I get conflicted out of the other one, I'm happy to help. It's the whole point of choice.
Right, in that, right, it's an advisory, right, it's an advisory role, I think,
Yeah.
if you know, disclose to the group.
Yeah.
If that did like fit in there, like you did come up to
Yeah.
Eaton Lakeview, right,
Mhm.
like that's more of a, hey, by the way, guys, I own this property, right,
Yeah.
because you're not voting,
Mhm.
so.
So yeah, we hope to have CPDC, RMLD Board of Commissioners, RMLD staff, some town staff, and the consultant keep it somewhat small to 10 or less. But again, in efforts to help steer this ship and help us get to the goals that we draft together. So that was a little bit of an opinion. So
It's great.
it's an exciting effort.
It is.
It is.
It is,
I'm happy
yeah.
about that.
All right, board reorganization discussion. I'll say what I said last time, while you, weren't here. So, right, I've been on the board, I've been the chair the last year. Right, typically, we have the, secretary or the vice, it's the secretary, right? We don't have the vice chair. Secretary typically, right, for like, not a rule, but standard,
in.
right? They move forward. We don't have the secretary now, so and typically, right, again, not a rule, but typically, new members don't jump into the chair
Makes sense.
right away. So I had offered, given that we're sort of where we are and I think other people's schedules, that I would entertain being chair again, and if the people wanted to do that, I'd really only be interested through, let's say, December, like to get us through this MBTA communities thing, and then I'm happy to pass a torch at that point. Maybe we could have that conversation again. But right, if there's anyone else that wants to step in, I'm more than happy to pass a torch also. More than happy.
And I think at the last meeting, I even maybe suggested that I'd be happy to nominate you to see us through.
You did.
I
See us
think
through
though,
town meeting
I'd
and
put
the
it through
submission.
to the end of the year though.
So I think, right, like, my understanding of rules is that you nominate or whatever, you appoint someone for the year, right? And at any one time, someone can say, the chair can say, let's, vote for a reorganization. You have my commitment that I would bring that up back in January, if that's the way that we go, right? But I think it's, right, the appointment is for the votes for the year, so.
I would agree, it's probably healthy, especially what's staring in front of everybody, so it's great.
So I'll officially, since I said I would, I'll nominate John Kingston to be our chair.
Second,
Other nominations? Great, all those in favor? Opposed?
I have to abstain.
All right.
That's right.
And then secretary? Anyone?
Heather, how would you feel about being the secretary?
My schedule doesn't allow being chair, but I could be secretary, yeah.
I would can I nominate you to be secretary?
Okay.
I'll second that.
Any other nominations?
those in favor for Heather as secretary? Opposed? Abstaining?
Oh, yeah, sure, yeah, thank you.
All right,
Thank you
thank you,
to John and Heather for
Thank you,
leading
John.
us,
thank you.
continuing.
And so we have 3 meeting minutes. You're welcome to review and comment, even if you weren't at the meeting. But don't feel obliged.
Are we gonna take them in order, or do we just shout out changes?
We can take them in order.
Yeah, I can pull them up. Let's start with March. I didn't have any comments on March.
Got 3, 11, 4, 8, and 7, 15. Well, I'll start with the first one. I move that we approve the minutes for 3/11/2024.
Second.
I had no changes.
What?
I had no comments.
I had no comments on that. Did I hear a second?
I second.
Do we vote on that even though we weren't present?
You can? Yeah. All right, all those in favor? Opposed? Abstaining? All right,
I have some notes on the April one.
Don't wanna get into it.
So when I open it in Word, it's slightly different than when I open it in, but it's on page 5 in Word on the last paragraph. It says Miss Klish, and it says dumpers instead of dumpsters. Right below Miss Klish. Oh, good call. And I have one more on this one. Okay. On page 8, again, it's right under Miss Klish on the second to last paragraph. And it says, the trees planted have dies.
I had that one also.
Right below Miss Klish, instead of dies, it's died. That's all I got.
I have another one, on the Google Docs version, page 2, the very end, the paragraph starts with Mr. McNichol stated that the design should incorporate. Parking, and it says parking racks on Haven Street and Depot Street, is there a Depot Street, or is that a typo?
Unless someone referenced it as
Meant to be High Street.
Yes.
It could be
Haven Street, yeah. Haven Street. It must be High Street,
Is this one?
where the depot is.
Unless it was, I don't think you would reference it as depot, so it's probably supposed to be High Street.
by the depot.
Or
Yeah.
somebody may have said by the depot.
Yeah, and those are the 2 primary streets in this project, so.
No, that was it, I
I have one on what I think is page 3 near the bottom, paragraph that starts Mr. Weston. The last phrase should be except for where it is not required as part of stormwater management. And that's all I had. Anyone else? We good?
Okay, I'll move that we approve the meeting minutes from April 8th, 2024.
Second? All those in favor?
Wait, I can't vote, go.
Opposed? Opposed, abstaining? All right. And July 15th? I had none.
Neither did I.
Alright.
So I move that we accept the meeting minutes from July 15th, 2024.
Second?
All those in favor? Opposed, abstaining? All right. I think there's a motion?
To adjourn?
Yeah,
I motion that this meeting is adjourned.
I second.
all right. All those in favor?
We're out, right?
9:30.
Thank you.
But we have to